Hello and welcome back to the art studio here in Irthingborough, and you'll be glad to know that I'm feeling a lot better. We've been away for 3 weeks because I've not been very well, but it's so nice to be back in the studio and back working with you for our art classes. Now what I've been doing when I've been feeling up to it over the last few weeks is I've been drawing a portrait, which is just sat behind me here, of my wife. I took a photograph of her and I've been thinking about the angle that we sit at when we take a photo to do a portrait from. So what you'll need to do is take your own photograph if you're going to draw your portrait this week. It doesn't have to be yourself, it can be somebody else. You can use your phone and then print it from there, but have a go at taking a photo. Now here's what I'd like you to do. What you need to do is sit at a 3/4 angle on the shoulders, and if you're looking directly forward from there, turn the head slightly so it's looking that way, a slightly more forward angle, and then you bring the eyes towards. So it's something like this, so that your portrait has 3 angles on it. One here, one from the chin, and then another from the eyes looking straight towards the camera, like this. So that gives you 3 different angles and and it also gives a sense of movement and gives it a bit more life. Whereas if we're sitting straight forward like this, then it's kind of, you know, still and perhaps not as interesting. So a 3/4 view with the head slightly turned and the eye looking straight into the camera. You can do a smile or you can do a serious picture, but try to take a photo like that. Now you'll need as well, you'll need a 2B pencil, really nicely sharpened with a long lead. The reason for that is it gives you a little bit more time between sharpening pencils if you've got it nice and you've got a nice long lead and a sharpened pencil. You'll need one of these eventually, which is it's a blending stick for your pencil. You'll need that a little bit later on. You can alternatively use cotton bud. You may also find, when we come to use charcoal, some tissue for blending the charcoal, and of course some normal charcoal like this when we start to put the tones in a little bit later. So the video that I've prepared for you today it's at the normal sort of length that you've seen before, but there's quite a lot more work that's taken place within it. Okay, so when you start drawing your portrait, you'll need to look at both the negative shapes around the portrait, and so on these shapes around here, and then what you need to do is think about the larger shapes, and then gradually you start to work into the smaller ones. Now on the video, and I'll talk through it in the video, is you will see me using a pencil or one of these, which is this is just a bit of dowel for measuring the angles. And basically a lot of the time if I want the angle of the face across there, so if I want the angle of the face on the portrait here, I'll be taking the angle using my measuring stick and then transferring that over onto my drawing. But you want to get all the big shapes first because we're working from the outside in, and get all the different details in, continuously measuring all of those different angles as well all the time, and making corrections. So work quite lightly and carefully and delicately to begin with. Don't do any dark marks, because what you want to do is, if you want to make corrections, you're going to need to take them out again, and if you damage the paper by going too hard, then obviously that's going to be a bit harder to get rid of. So nice and gently and delicately work into those shapes. Alright, so I've talked now for 5 minutes, so let's get started on the video. Okay, so this is a Renaissance portrait, and it illustrates what I was just talking about really. It illustrates the 3/4 view with the head slightly turned forward and the eyes looking directly at us to give that sense of movement. So I've taken this idea forward into our own portraits that we're going to be doing. So it'd be nice if you could take a photo at this sort of angle. Here's a picture of my wife that I took at a similar angle. So you've got again the shoulders at 3/4 view, the head turned slightly and the eyes looking straight at us. She had this nice sort of turn of her head at the same time, which is really nice. Okay, so for this piece of work, what I've actually done is I'm working at a easel. So I've got the easel set straight up vertically, and I've got the photo just stuck on some shelves over at the side. Now you'll notice that I start off by doing lots of measuring using the comparative method that I've talked about in previous lessons. I'll put that on again so that you can have a look at it, but I'm using the pencil to just get the right angles in order to start marking out the face. You can't see it very clearly at the moment, but you can just about see the lines appearing, and you can see me using the pencil, and you'll notice I've got the pencil underneath my hand rather than on top. I'm using the pencil to get the angles and transfer them from the photograph over onto my picture. Now I'm also keeping an eye on the negative shapes behind the portrait, as that helps me to place the whole picture. But basically what we're trying to do here is work with the larger shapes to begin with, the larger shapes on the portrait, in order to then gradually narrow down into the smaller shapes. And during all of this time, and indeed a bit later on, what you'll see is that I'm continuously checking and rechecking my measuring. So the little drawing that I've put down there is the result of all of the bits that I was doing, in all the shapes that I was drawing, in order to get the correct proportions and things. Having said that, as I've gone through the drawing process, what I've done is made alterations as I've gone along. So for example, on the ear and the eye and the lips, I've changed those shapes, and the shape of the hair and other little bits and pieces on here as well have been altered from the drawing that you can see from this first section. So you can just about see now the portrait is appearing, and you can see me continuously checking and remodeling all of the lines in order to get them at the right angle, and keep checking them. And this is something that you continuously do throughout the drawing. So I spent a couple of, at least 3 or 4 hours drawing these different shapes. But as I said, you start with the largest shapes first and check them again to make sure that you've got them as accurate as possible. There will be things as you go through the drawing process that you didn't notice and you need to alter, and as I just said, that was something that I continuously did through this process. So I'm also using here, I'm just using the pencil to make measurements, say from the ridge of the nose to the outside of the head on the left hand side, and then using that measurement to work out how far it is between the eyes and towards the hair, so you can start to measure different distances and comparing them with your own drawing. Now if you're unsure of what I mean by all of this, then I did make a short video quite a while ago now in one of the earlier lessons that shows you how to use this comparative method of measuring. You can see me doing it here. You have to have your arm extended right out like that, you see? So I'm keeping the arm extended out all of the time, and then bringing my pencil across and comparing it with what I've got in the photo to what I've got in the drawing. And you can see me, I'm putting little bits in and taking bits out as I go along there. I made a line to show the angle of the eyes across the middle of the picture as well. So you can just about see the form and the shape, the large shapes that make up the bulk of, say, the hair, the headband, the t-shirt. You can see all of those big areas coming through in the picture and starting to form our portrait. So when you're measuring, you can measure objects horizontally, so you use the pencil or your measuring stick to measure across the picture, but you can equally do what's called plumb lines, which are lines that go directly vertically down. So say you were measuring from the tear duct down to the edge of the mouth. That would give you an indication of where to start the mouth and where the eye should be in comparison to each other. So you hold the pencil vertically up. You might close your eye slightly, one of your eyes slightly, so that you don't get double vision, and you can see where those measurements are on the vertical as well as the horizontal. But you saw me just a minute ago here measuring the angle of the nose. So I hold the pencil up and then then hold the arm out straight and move the line, move the pencil across to the paper so that you can actually match that specific angle to the angle on your picture. You can see me doing it right now. So the eye that I'm drawing in right now, later on it needed a little bit of adjustment. I got the angle slightly out there, but this is all part of the process. You see things as you work and make progress. And then gradually, obviously, we're working down into the smaller shapes. I'm cheating a little bit because I've started doing the eye, but I just love doing the eye. So this is quite a little while later, and you can see that I've mapped out the shadows. I've also thought quite carefully about where the skull is and everything else, the openings of the skulls, the movements of the muscles around the face. It's all things you can investigate a little bit more closely to learn how to do the portrait. But what I do at this stage is I've started to map out the main tonal areas using a piece of charcoal. Now this bit this bit can be quite scary because obviously you're going over quite a lot of the details that you put in, but those details were important to put in because they give you an accurate idea of where to put all the shadows a little bit later. So once you put in your charcoal, you can rub it with some tissue. You'll also see me using the blending stick that I mentioned at the start of the video to neaten up, but you'll notice how much lighter the charcoal does go. And all the charcoal that you put on, it is kind of correctable or movable with a soft kneaded rubber, putty rubber. So you can you can virtually take out all the charcoal to add highlights and things. You don't need to go too heavy with it. You're just using the side of the charcoal and gently putting in some tone. So you'll have a light tonal drawing
of your portrait by the end, and you'll actually be able to see how it's going generally. So again, you can see just the little pitch down in the on the right hand corner. You can see how I've added all the tones in on there. I did a little bit more after that. There was quite a bit more to do, but you get an idea of how the drawing has changed from a line drawing, showing where all the shapes are, into a tonal charcoal drawing. So here we go. So this is me adding in. Now you see that cane just over there. That's and you'll see at the start of the video, you see it sort of hanging on the board. It's called a maul stick, and it's basically you put that, hang it over the board on the top of your easel, and it means that you've got something to rest your hand on so that you don't get your whole picture all smudged, because you know it's a bit of a pain if you've got to keep rubbing off all the smudges from your hand. It means you've got something to rest on as you work, and you can move the maul stick around, you can put it at different angles so you can get to different parts of your picture while you're working. So there you go. But the charcoal look, it's quite dark to begin with, but then you'll see me using the blending stick, which is basically rolled up paper, to lighten off those areas. So this eye here is it's one of the darkest areas on the face itself. So I've gone in a little bit heavier there, but you can layer in some more charcoal as you want, or you can take it back off again with the kneaded rubber, the putty rubbers. So you know, this is the scary bit because it does look a bit kind of odd to begin with, but you've got to remember that the whole of the face needs doing before you can make those sorts of judgments, if you like. So the hair on this portrait is quite nice because it does frame the face quite well, and it gives it a nice kind of edge to then judge and compare the skin tones to as you work. So I really enjoyed doing this. It's good fun. There we go. And I'm just using that tissue paper to lift off some of that charcoal and take the tones back. And you can already see the form of the face starting to gradually appear. Back into the ears. So even though this is one of the scariest bits is getting started here, it is also, if you take your time, one of the most exciting, I think. There we are. Now with the blending stick's also brilliant because it does pick up some of the charcoal, and it picks up the pencil if you use pencil, and that little bit of pencil on there can be used just to add a bit more tone in different places as you're working too. So if you've blotted out or lightened up with with a blending stick one area, you can take some of that charcoal you've lifted off and put a bit of tone in other areas as well. So even if you don't get all of the tones completely accurate whilst doing this, you'll be working into them a hell of a lot more as you progress on the picture. So the little picture down there on the right hand side, you can see that there's you'll see later how I've adjusted the eye. The eye was a little bit on the small side, so I changed that as I progress a bit later on. So on the actual lesson, what I'll be doing is I'll be carrying on working into the details of this as you make progress with yours and start drawing it out, and I'll be able to give you a bit of feedback on that as we work. So you can see me using the blending stick just there. And putty rubber just to take a little bit out where I felt it was just a bit too much there. That said, you can always go back into it as well if you want to. It's quite important to think about where the bone structure is underneath the skin as well. So I'm working on the cheekbones here, and some of the lines and the marks, like around the bridge of the nose and the shadows around the bridge of the nose, are all due to the structure of the skull underneath the skin and the way the muscles are placed on the face as well. So now you can see what I was talking about with the blending stick. It's got graphite on it, or it's got charcoal on it, so you can see how I've just rubbed in a little bit of tone. And remember, this is only for indication purposes for later working back over the top with pencil, but it's just starting to give the nose a little bit more shape before I then start to really work into it a bit later. There we go. And there was a nice little wispy bit coming off the side of the head there, which I'm not sure I needed, but I do lighten it up a little bit so it doesn't dominate too much. There. So I'm trying not to go too detailed at this point. I'm just indicating where the strands and the bits of hair are coming down on the face. There'll be quite a bit of adjusting to do on that later. So next, it's you can see how light the picture is, but it's a really nice map of where things go. Later on, I do make quite a few adjustments to the picture. This is not actually on the video. So I changed, like I said earlier, I changed the lips and the eyes and the ear, which I'm now working on at the moment a little bit. And so, you know, even if you find that things are a little bit out of place, you can still go back and change them a little bit. Here's me obviously working into the eye, and you'll see me using my rubber. See how the charcoal comes off really nicely, so you can get the highlights back in. So that was just a putty rubber, but if you want to get it off even more, you want a nice mechanical or hard rubber to get off a little bit more of that tone. So we start to see the picture come to life, and you see the maul sticks being used effectively there as well, so that I don't have to worry about smudging my work as I go. So with the hair here, I'm not trying to get all the details of the hair in at the moment. I'm just trying to get an indication of where the tones and the highlights are in the hair. So you'll see me eventually, there you go, using a little bit of the putty rubber just to sort of indicate where some of the highlights will be, and then later on we'll be working back into those to bring out those finer details in the portrait, and that'll be next week. You can see how the eye and things starts coming to life. Use the rubber to take bits out and add highlights into the nose, and then I'm adding shadow gradually in there on the side too. And what you'll see at different points, probably if it's been filmed, is that I go There you go, I'm just adding a little bit of a highlight over the eye. What I do is I use the blending stick, so if I put down a little bit of tone, what I then go to do is go over it with the blending stick, and here I am, look, just checking measurements to see that the pupil is correctly in line with the nose. Now it is at an angle, so you can't quite see from here what I'm doing, but what I found was that the eye was slanted upwards a little bit too much, so I changed that later, along with the bottom lip, which was a little bit too thin. But it is interesting to see how work changes as you progress. Adding a little bit of shadow just under the nose, working back into the eyes, and I'm not, forcing this to go quicker or anything. I'm taking plenty of time just to build up levels of tone really gradually, because if you take your time a little bit more, you're more likely to see where these things need to happen. But it's such a joy to see your drawing take shape, and it's also interesting to see where you haven't spotted things, because the things that you don't spot now, next time you do your drawing you'll think, I need to look at that, I need to check that, and then you'll get better. So it's about this kind of intensity of concentration that we're looking for. So there you go, you can see me just gradually using the side of the pencil to put in a little bit of tone and shadow and highlights and things as I go along. Get a little bit more detail in here. So this sort of stage is actually called modelling, because you're looking where the tones and shadows are and just gradually layering them on top of each other and putting them in to help them start to materialize and create this 3D form on the flat 2D surface. So I did quite a lot more after this little clip here, and you can see that on the drawing, but I've still got quite a lot of work to do on it, which I'll be doing with you on Wednesday. So you can see that in just a second it's going to come up. Shows you both the photo and the drawing that I've done so far. Loads of fun. So I'll see you on Wednesday.